Okay, chapter 7. Ishmael goes on his walk and enters into a whaleman's chapel. Okay, this is a short chapter, but it's really interesting, right? It's a classic Melville. You get half of it is setup and plot, and then he just goes into fifth gear on figurative stuff. And, these are some chapters you can really sink your teeth into and talk about. So I'm excited for this one. First thing is that he goes into the chapel and he says he finds a small group of sailors, wives, and widows. And of course, you're going to see the immediate reason why I highlighted this in yellow when I read that it says, "A muffled silence reigned, only broken at times by the shrieks of the storm. Each silent worshipper seemed purposefully sitting apart from the other, as if each silent grief were insular and incommunicable." I mean, wow, it isn't just a powerful thing, because anyone who has experienced great sadness or grief or despair knows that those feelings do feel like you're separated from other people, but you're separated not in the physical way of sitting apart, but in the emotional way of feeling like you're the only person who understands your feelings, which of course abstracts us back up to that question of knowledge and understanding, not necessarily about something as metaphysical as the whale or the ocean, not necessarily about the social mores of a Queequeg and his actions in the Spouter Inn, but more, once again, back to that notion of phenomenological independence, where the emotions and feelings of a particular human being are very difficult to abstract and talk about because they are so concrete and illogical that the best we can do is we can use words. But this passage seems to throw doubt into the idea of whether that's even meaningful, seeing as this grief is described as incommunicable. If you think about your own life and grief you may or may not have experienced, perhaps that rings true for you, perhaps it doesn't. Then we run into something which is called a cenotaph. Okay, a cenotaph is a monument for the dead which are not actually buried there. Okay, and there's these 3 marble tablets which Ishmael quotes, and he says, first, one is for a person who was lost overboard in Patagonia. The second is for various people who were on the ship Eliza who were towed out of sight by a whale. And I have that in orange because that's a little bit of a ominous thing to have Ishmael read, the notion that you could die simply by successfully harpooning a whale, but it just towing you either out of sight of the boat or under the water. And then finally, I have in orange here, the third one is about a person who was killed by a sperm whale off the coast of Japan. So again, kind of ominous. So Ishmael is reading these tablets, and he starts thinking to himself about the notion of grieving and death and mourning. And where we kind of start getting super figurative, whenever you see this little phrase here, "Oh, exclamation point ye," that's when Melville is about to go off. Okay, he's about to start making a point. You'll see it happen time and time again. "Oh, ye blank, blank, blank." So let's see where he starts. We're going to have to go slowly through this. "Oh, ye whose dead lie buried beneath the green grass, who standing among flowers can say, Here, here lies my beloved. Ye know not the desolation that broods in bosoms like these." Okay, so Ishmael starts by contrasting people who know where their family or friends or loved ones are buried and those who don't. Now, why would that be something which gives great sadness to the people who don't? Well, let's find out. What bitter blanks in those black-bordered marbles which cover no ashes? What despair in those immovable inscriptions? What deadly voids and unbidden infidelities in the lines that seem to gnaw upon all faith, and refuse resurrections to the beings who have placelessly perished without a grave? As well might those tablets stand in the cave of Elephanta as here. I had to look this up. The cave of Elephanta is a cave, I'm forgetting now. I think it was off the coast of somewhere in South, no, it's Maharashtra, Western India, okay? So what he's saying is that without a grave, without the physical evidence of someone's death, mourning seems a lot more difficult because there's a lack of knowledge about what happened to that person. and there's a lack of solace that comes. But then we go into a totally different discussion that's not necessarily about mourning, but just about our relationship to death itself. He says, in what census of living creatures the dead of mankind are included? Why is it that a universal proverb says of them that they tell no tales, though they contain more secrets than the Goodwin Sands? Now, if you are curious, the Goodwin Sands is a rather obscure reference, but it does refer to this place in the, English Channel where lots of ships get wrecked. It's like a very dangerous part of the English Channel, which looks deeper than it is, etc., etc. So it's a place where lots of stuff lies buried. So what Ishmael is asking is kind of confusing, right? He says, why is it that the dead of mankind are said to tell no tales, but they also have more information in them than this place with all these mysteries? How is it that to his name, who yesterday departed for the other world, we prefix so insignificant and infidel a word? So significant and infidel a word. I assume he means departed. We refer to them as the departed. And yet do not thus entitle him, if he but embarks for the remotest Indies of this living earth. So now there's a clear contrast being drawn. Ishmael is asking, if someone disappears because they died, we constantly say stuff like departed, they're not here anymore, they tell no tales. Whereas even people who are way the heck out there in the remotest Indies, right, we say that they're still alive and they're still here, when functionally, I guess there's not much different in Ishmael's eyes. Why the life insurance companies pay death for forfeitures upon immortals? Okay, so now we're getting a more interesting claim. If people believe that the dead live forever because they go to heaven, why would life insurance companies pay out money if those people are still alive in heaven? In what eternal unstirring paralysis and deadly hopeless trance yet lies antique Adam who died 60 round centuries ago? How is it that we still refuse to be comforted for those who we nevertheless maintain are dwelling in unspeakable bliss? Now we're getting to his point. If true Christians believe that dying, if you are reconciled and have been a good person, lets you go to heaven, why would people see any distinction between the sadness of having someone die and not having a grave versus having someone die and having a grave? Isn't it all kind of gravy? I was going to say all gravy. Wow. I'm not going to say it was intentional, but I'm not going to say it wasn't intentional. Isn't it all gravy in the end? That if we all end up dwelling in unspeakable bliss, then who cares whether you have a grave or just a cenotaph? Why all the living so strive to hush all the dead? Wherefore but the rumor of a knocking in a tomb will terrify a whole city? Okay, so now Ishmael is kind of making a bit more provocative claim, saying, do people actually believe that people go to heaven? Because when people have their loved ones die and don't have a grave to mourn them at, they're so sad that it almost becomes convincing that they don't think they're in heaven. And then, here's the other evidence that people might not truly believe in heaven. What if you actually had evidence that someone came back? What if there was a rumor of a knocking in a tomb? It would terrify the whole city. Even people who theoretically believe in heaven. So, this is a classic thought experiment that people run. What if Jesus Christ came back today? I mean, who would believe him, right? And then he says, all these things are not without their meanings. Okay? So, this is explicitly him saying, this question will come down to what your knowledge and interpretation of the afterlife and the metaphysics of the world are. You have to answer these questions. And those questions are going to be answered by your understanding of truth. But faith, like a jackal, feeds among the tombs, and even from these dead doubts she gathers her most vital hope. So that seems like a pretty cynical line, to compare faith to a bottom feeder like a jackal that hunts on carrion. Okay, on dead things, is to say that I guess people believe in heaven because they have these doubts about what will happen to their dead friends, and that's what gives people hope in faith. Okay? It scarcely needs to be told with what feelings on the eve of a Nantucket voyage I regarded those marble tablets, and by the murky light of that dark and doleful day read the fate of the whalemen who had gone before me. Yes, Ishmael, the same fate may be thine. Okay, so this question about the knowledge or truth of the afterlife and metaphysics is particularly pressing for Ishmael, seeing as he is about to go on a very dangerous journey. But now he's going to flip it on his head, and what has been a very kind of cynical and critical attitude towards faith, especially in faith and life after death, takes a 180-degree turn, and once again Melville, as he loves to do, will establish an ambiguous position on this question. But somehow I grew merry again. Delightful inducements to embark. Fine chance for promotion, it seems. A stove boat will make me an immortal by brevet, and brevet is a commission given to someone, basically jumping them in rank. So now he's kind of flipping the script. He's saying, wait, maybe the danger of a whaling trip is a good thing, because if dying gets you to go to heaven, then a great chance of dying will get me a great chance of being metaphorically promoted to go to heaven. Yes, there is death in this business of whaling, a speechlessly quick, chaotic bundling of a man into eternity, but what then? Methinks we have hugely mistaken this matter of life and death. Methinks that what they call my shadow here on earth is my true substance. Methinks that in looking at things spiritual, we are too much like oysters observing the sun through the water, and thinking that thick water the thinnest of air. Methinks my body is but the lees, or the worthless part of my better being, his spiritual being. In fact, take my body who will. Take it, I say. It is not me. And therefore 3 cheers for Nantucket, and come a stove boat and stove body when they will, for stave my soul, Jove himself cannot. So wow, now Ishmael has done a 180-degree turn. He said, I don't care about my physical body. Go ahead, kill my physical body. It is but the worthless part of my spiritual being. 3 cheers for whaling, because even if my body gets staved in, right, which is the past tense of stove, which is a verb to heat in the stove or to break, Jove, God himself, cannot destroy my soul. So 2 things. Obviously, in the context of knowledge and understanding, I can't help myself when I see a metaphor, or rather a simile, like oysters observing the sun through the water. I mean, what better image to describe the opacity and the difficulty of penetrating into the truth of a question as difficult as what happens to you after you die. I mean, it's probably the most unanswerable question of all human questions, right? We are, in this case, like oysters, which is a beautiful figurative association because it makes us think of ourselves as not even having like a vertebrae, like being such a low form of life, just like our understanding is so limited and so low in the context of understanding difficult metaphysical questions like this. So even though the chapter ends on a particularly, I would say, like a committed or strong note from Ishmael, let's not forget that the first half of it is equally as critical as the second half is equally hopeful. So I think how this all plays together is not to make a clear, it's Melville. You're not going to get a clear statement like, believe in heaven or you're a dummy, or don't believe in heaven or you're a dummy. But a real investigation of all of the difficult, logical, and illogical questions about trying to make a truth claim about something as ambiguous as metaphysics and life after death. So a wonderful passage that for me illustrates Melville's willingness to take the middle position, play both sides of the coin, and force the reader to really think, wait, what do I think is true about life and death and eternity?